trees, honey bees, and snow white turtle doves. I'd like to teach the world to sing in perfect harmony. I'd like to buy the world a coat and keep it company. That's the song I'd like to teach the world to sing in perfect harmony. I'd like to buy the world a
Your cell phone, your wallet, your time, your ideas, no barcode, no party, no ID, no beers, your bank card, your license, your thoughts, your fears, no SIM card, no disco, no photo, not here, your blood, your sweat, your passions, your regrets, your profits, your time off, your fashions, your sex, your pills, your grass, your tits, your ass, your laughs, your balls, we want
your soul.
Your house, your home, your life, your cash, your house, your phone.
We want your soul.
Your house, your home, your life, your cash, your house, your phone.
We want your soul.
Tell us your habits, your fads, your fears. Give us your address, your shoe size, your years, your digits, your plans, your number, your eyes, your schedule, your desktop, your details, your life. Show us your children, your photos, your home. Here, take credit, take insurance, take a loan, get a job, get a pension, get a haircut, get a suit, playing the lottery, play football, play the field, snort some toot. We'll show you things, we'll show you food, we'll buy you drinks, throw away your books, we'll sell you crap, we'll charge you tax. Wanna buy big guns, we'll front the cash.
Your soul.
Your house, your home,
We want your soul.
your house, your home,
We want your soul.
your house, your home,
We want your soul.
your house, your home.
We want
Your
your
thoughts,
soul.
your emotions, your love, your dreams, your checkbook, your essence, your sweat, your screams, your security, your sobriety, your innocence, your society, yourself, your place, your distance, your space.
Go back to bed, America. Your government is in control again. Here, watch this. Shut up. You are free to do as we tell you. You are free to do as we tell you.
We are trained to ace every standardized test, and those who deviate and see light through a different lens are worthless to the scheme of public education, and therefore viewed with contempt. H.L. Mencken wrote in the American Mercury for April 1924 that the aim of public education is not to fill the young of this species with knowledge and awaken their intelligence. Nothing could be further from the truth. The aim is simply to reduce as many individuals as possible to the same safe level, to breed and train a standardized citizenry, to put down dissent and originality. That is the aim in the United States. To illustrate this idea, doesn't it perturb you to learn about the idea of critical thinking? Is there really such a thing as uncritically thinking? To think is to process information in order to form an opinion. But if we are not critical when processing this information, are we really thinking? Or are we mindlessly accepting other opinions as truth? Are we mindlessly accepting other opinions as truth?
We want your soul.
Here's boy bands, here's Mackers, here's Britney, here's Cola, here's pizza, here's TV, here's some rock, and some roller. Watch commercials, more commercials, watch Jerry, not Oprah. Buy a better life from the comfort of your sofa. Here's popcorn, here's magazines, here's milkshake, here's blue jeans, here's padded bars, here's armpit wax, here's football shirts, here's baseball caps, here's live talk shows, here's video games, here's Cola Light, here's Tin Morning, here's filter tips, here's collagen lips, here's all night mall, here's plastic
Your
hips.
soul.
Your house, your home,
We want your soul.
your house, your home.
We want your soul.
Go back to bed, America. Your government is in control again. Here's American gladiators. Watch this. Shut up. Go back to bed, America. Here's American gladiators. Here's 56 channels of it. Watch these pituitary retards bang their fucking skulls together and congratulate you on living in the land of freedom. Here you go, America. You are free to do as we tell you. You are free to do as we tell you.
We want your soul. 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 We want your soul.
No strays, no dropouts, no gays, no lefties, no loonies, no opinions, no way. No thinkers, no teachers, no facts, no freaks, no skaters, no tweakers, no truth, no fun. Here's popcorn, here's magazines, here's milkshake, here's blue jeans, here's padded bars, here's armpit wax, here's football shirts, here's baseball caps. Here's very, 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 very long infomercials.
We are living in an age of great deception. And that means a lot of things. To critical thinkers and investigative researchers, the blatant fraudulence just keeps mounting like never before. It's more pervasive than the average person might even believe. From history to sports results to celebrity deaths to day-to-day news and even to modern science, we are in a cesspool of disinformation, fake news, and manipulated events. As bad as things may seem, there is a solution that everyone can participate in to rebel, break the programming, and force the eventual and inevitable paradigm shift on its way. Whether people realize it or not, there's a spiritual war going on, and consequently, an information war. And many people who are still asleep, trusting the system, and lost in the matrix, so to speak, may feel they are well-adjusted, reasonable, and sound of mind enough to not be fooled by anything. Ironically, these are the people most easily fooled. In order to know things, you have to bring yourself out and down to the point of realizing that you don't know anything. And then when you learn to stop blindly trusting things you once took as givens, you begin to see the real picture. In addition to this, many people subconsciously feel that the lies are going to come from obvious villains. Sometimes, but not in this day and age. Many times, the lies will come from familiar faces that champion the issues you're passionate about. Never over the top, but very subtle and in increments. Rather, these people will speak truth on a regular basis with popular centrist views, and when you don't even realize it, they fulfill agendas with covert suggestion, implications, and lies. You can feel it and see an awakening is being fought. For example, for many alternative journalists and truth channels, our incentives are under attack daily. They're finding new ways to silence whistleblowers and truth speakers. They're finding ways to slow down the ad revenue. They're basically trying to drown truth out. They want us all to go back to trusting the people who are given their platforms, who gain our trust, but very covertly slip agendas through. And they don't want you to hear opposing, well-researched views that oppose those agendas. They want to continue to control popular opinion, and they are afraid of truth. because everything they have crumbles. Dealing with the times we're in, there were times where I felt tired, isolated even, because even though there are so many people that do understand these things on a deeper level, the vast majority of people are completely in the dark, and many are impressionable victims of this constant social engineering and misinformation all across the board. It became overwhelming because I don't just do this for self-serving interests. I believe in individuals letting their light shine to help raise the collective vibration of society. Despite all the bad, the world is trying to heal and rid itself of its cancerous entities, trying to keep the collective vibration down. All day you see people on social media talking back and forth about things they clearly don't understand. And these people, the obedient sheep, sometimes have a way of making you, the awake, critical thinker, feel like the fool, or dare I say it, the misguided, paranoid conspiracy theorist. It's maddening, and there are many psychological reasons why this is, and this is nothing new. What people are finally growing to understand is that the systems we live in are not in the best interest of we, the people. We're in a matrix, and if you don't understand this, you're asleep, then consequently, you are a part of it. Let me show you just how deep the deception goes. The very popular scientist, Neil deGrasse Tyson, is a man I respected. I respected his knowledge and his zeal for science. And I don't agree with everything anyone says, but I also appreciated his social commentary on talk shows. I always looked forward to hearing what he had to say. And then it happened. There's a viral video going around that popped up in my feeds and I clicked on. The intro was powerful, and I'm like, wow, this is going to be good. He basically talks about the pervasive anti-intellectualism in America and how it is stunting social progression, which is very true. People don't know things, but still back the wrong people and groups and push misguided political agendas through. People also have a disdain for scientific authority. But now we're getting into subjective territory. In the video, Tyson says that we have become a society that is no longer able to discern truth from fact. And it's the truth.
But in this, the 21st century, when it comes time to make decisions about science, it seems to me people have lost the ability to judge what is true and what is not. What is reliable, what is not reliable. What should you believe, what should you not believe? And when you have people who don't know much about science, standing in denial of it and rising to power, that is a recipe for the complete dismantling of our informed democracy.
Let us demand that educators around America teach evolution not as fact, but as theory.
An increasing number of parents showing skepticism about vaccination.
Voters have approved a ban on GMOs.
Critics call climate change unproven science.
That's not the country I remember growing up in.
Full stop. After such a rousing intro, the first three things he featured in the video was a push on evolution, then vaccines, and then genetically modified foods. And I'm like, wow, you too. Let's begin with the first. It was a clip of Mike Pence saying that evolution should not be taught as fact, but as a theory. And the implication of the video was that he was wrong and politicizing his ideology. Now, I don't even like or support Mike Pence's politics. I really don't. But what he said in that clip was spot on. I didn't even know I was going to agree with him. Now, listen, clear your mind and don't react to what you think you know. Don't let yourself be emotionally compromised and brainwashed by these people set up to do just that. Think and listen. Yes, you should pay the necessary homage to people who have more expertise than you, but you don't need someone with multiple doctorates to tell you common sense. There was nothing wrong with what Mike Pence said. Here's a little known fact. Evolution isn't a fact. That's why it's called the theory of evolution. Let's just punch it even further while I'm here. Evolution isn't even real. It's what they want you to believe. And it's been that way for quite some time now. And for everyone about to jump all over that statement, stop. Understand that you really don't know anything to say anything in objection. Like most of us, you don't really know the science or its validity. You have just been listening to people, like the aforementioned, imply these things to you your whole life, and now you can't think in any other direction. Again, evolution isn't real. These are some of the things most people don't understand because we don't get a real education. It's always been a theory with several unanswered, gaping holes in it that Darwin himself admitted.
But as the evolutionary perspective was given more authority, scientists were under pressure to prove Darwin's hypothesis and explain how life forms could possibly have changed from one form into another.
Finally, man. And here we are now, the product of billions of mistakes.
Scientists know the genetic code prevents one life form from changing into another kind. So they speculate that mutations or damages to the DNA must be responsible for evolutionary processes. Again, they believe this in spite of the observable evidence that no new species has ever resulted from a mutation.
Mutations are almost always harmful. They can bring about small adjustments in a particular species, but no way are they able to change one kind of creature into another.
If evolution has really occurred, we ought to be able to see the evidence in the fossil record. After all, that's the record of the past. But if we look at that fossil record carefully, we see that there are no recorded instances of one type of an animal ever changing into another. There's no transitional forms.
I won't go too deep into why it isn't real, because that's another long conversation entirely, and another debate. So let me just keep this argument idealistically, irrefutably true, whether anyone believes it or not. Fact. Evolution is not fact. It is a theory that does get taught to us as if it were fact. And the irony is that Tyson is here talking about stunted social progression and people not knowing what is true and what isn't, and then regardless what you believe, he puts something totally sound and true on display and implies that there's something wrong with it. Very interesting. I mean, I was all ready to hate on Mike Pence, but I'm a thinking person, not just an emotional person. And Pence hate does not apply here. Teaching things the way they're supposed to be taught is being shut down by a brainwashed popular opinion. They're scrambling your mind, making you feel the widely supported popular view is instead the suppressed voice of reason crying in the wilderness. And these are the reasons why so many people are so lost. The next thing he slipped in there was vaccines. Vaccines have become very controversial because more and more people are growing skeptical of vaccines and don't want to take them. Regardless which way you fall regarding the vaccine debate, please explain to me how vaccine skepticism is stunting scientific technological advancement. The answer is it isn't. This is a debate over the powers that be mandating something they're insisting is for our own good, despite some health risks. Here is the new growing issue with vaccines. Several vaccines have been effective throughout the decades, but it's a new day. Something is changing, and the suspicious need for more vaccines for children and for all of it to be mandatory everywhere is in hot debate. And people are coming forth with health issues. There are several independent scientific communities that have been presenting evidence of links between vaccines and cancer, developmental disabilities, and autism. And there are studies showing that people don't even need many of the vaccines, shots, and immunizations we're inundated with, making them more harmful than good, especially for children.
It wasn't until the New York State passing of the hepatitis B mandate in 1991. It struck me as kind of odd that they were mandating a vaccine for newborn babies when babies were not at risk for developing hepatitis B infection. It made me question whether or not we're doing a service to children by giving them all these vaccines and injections. There's more than just an assumption that vaccines are safe. It is pretty much regarded as law. But I don't think it's that black and white. There are many grays, and you have more and more people who are questioning it, and with good reason, because the science is not there to really state that vaccines are truly safe.
Vaccines, kids these days are getting multiple times more than, when I was a child. Is this making us healthier, more protected, or what is it actually doing with
No,
these
I mean,
large
I
doses?
really think we've way overdone it on the vaccines. It's funny how we've managed to program people to believe so thoroughly that vaccines are awesome, This was all set up with the polio and the smallpox, We said, oh yes, of course, vaccines are wonderful. When can I get a vaccine for this? Give me a vaccine that will fix this problem. We've got that entire mentality, which is amazing to me because the vaccines are full of toxic chemicals. And certainly I looked at the vaccines first, and I have there's a great database, the VAERS database, Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System. Very, very interesting. And I've looked at it. I mean, I'm a computer scientist, so I can go, look at the number crunching, looking at the words and what statistical distributions and whatnot. You can find a lot of things out from looking at VAERS. And one thing really striking is MMR. MMR is the vaccine, measles, mumps, and rubella. And Andrew Wakefield connected that to autism way back when, like 1998, I guess. He had this paper in Lancet, which was very interesting, and he had taken these certain cases of kids with autism and connected it to the MMR vaccine then. So this is something that's been around as a theory for autism for a long time.
The need for excessive vaccinations, shots, immunizations, etc., especially with children, is becoming unpopular, and someone above does not like that. So this isn't about anti-intellectualism or average Joes not listening to professionals in a field. Not at all. Some anti-vaccination people are actually listening to scientists, just not the ones selected and promoted as celebrities. But many of the doctors and scientists that they kill, get rid of, or drown out, and replace with more corporate pharmaceutical industry approved doctors and scientists. So the biggest industries with the biggest dollars buy the biggest science voices and then claim the scientific high ground. All others be shamed. They don't want you to be resourceful or to trust your own mind or the empirical evidence you could see for yourself. They want you to trust the authorities they put in place to tell us what to think on all issues, including vaccines. And through this authority, they can dictate what you put in your body or not, even if you just don't want to. Corporations have even made you worry about their problems. Under many forms of mind control, they have some of us out there working for them like drones without even realizing it, posting memes on social media, making fun of anti-vaccination people. Why would you do that? Newsflash, if you're really concerned about epidemics breaking out or the flu that keeps mutating anyway, take yourself and your family and go get yourself vaccinated. Done. You as an individual entity no longer have anything to worry about. But the programming to be pro-vaccine, and if you're not, you're doing something wrong and irresponsible, is everywhere. Lots of people don't blindly trust the medical industry because no sensible person would. It isn't about our health and well-being first. Today, it is about profit first. And lots of people are being habituated to things they don't need. And some of those things are harmful. Again, that isn't anti-intellectualism, but quite the opposite. They want to push drugs. They don't want us to think independently or make informed decisions for ourselves. Genetically modified foods. Seriously? I don't think I need to even comment on this one. Even if people are just spiritual and would just rather not eat food that is cloned or artificially mutated or genetically modified, that is sensible, respectable, and that should be the end of it. There's nothing to discuss with a scientist. What's the point trying to be made here? They're just going to make genetically altered food and insist it's safe despite the growing body of evidence to the contrary and insist we eat it? Sorry, not everyone is an idiot. We know they are doing things that are best for efficiency and production, not public health. They don't care. So when concerns are growing and people are starting to not want to eat frankenfood, the powers that be start to get a little pissy about it. And then they employ corporate science to produce findings that support GMOs. If you want to eat cloned animals injected with drugs and hormones or engineered vegetables, then you go for it. But don't criticize people who don't want any of that and suggest they learn to like it because science. For multiple reasons that I don't have time to squeeze into this video and digress, I do not advocate eating genetically modified foods. But if someone doesn't mind, that's their right. But to go as far as to push propaganda campaigns, to condemn people who'd rather not, is a new low. Puppets for corporate America and industry. This is not how it's supposed to work. Most people want fresh, natural foods, and industries bend to demand. They don't demand, you bend. Look at how much garbage was pushed onto the people, attacking subconscious thought before he got to the crux of his message. This is where we are today. This is an age in which deception is at an all-time high. Like I said before, most people think that the lies are going to come from obvious villains. If you believe that, you're in a world of trouble. The lies are going to come from familiar faces we know and trust. It's all a part of the game. And the lies and the deception is everywhere. They lie about history and still slip revisionism through in current day. They lie about our agendas and current events. The powers that be are also creating sometimes fake or sometimes orchestrated events, ridiculously at this point. Every other week we're inundated with another tragedy, a shooting, a terrorist plot. And the sad truth is that many of these things are psyops. We're seeing an insane society with criminally insane leadership coming undone. There is a way to fight this constant attack on our minds. In the old G.I. Joe cartoons, they used to say a corny slogan at the end, and it was, "And knowing is half the battle." And that is true. It's a very simple statement, but very powerful. Simply knowing that these things are happening and that you cannot trust what you see in the media is already a huge step toward change. I know people who are completely detached from these realities. These things are too foreign and uncomfortable for some people to accept, and they're too stuck in the system. They dismiss things without really looking into it and call people conspiracy theorists. And so they never let critical thinking or information in. But if you emancipate yourself from that mental enslavement and simply understand that hearing something on the news or seeing it in a publication does not make the information true. Corporations don't have the heart and conscience that you do. Don't make that mistake of thinking, oh, well, they wouldn't, when yes, they would. They have been doing it and they will continue to. And these days, false narratives are reaching a peak. Rebel, reject the programming. And the more people push back and show that people are waking up and these things are no longer effective, they'll finally see that the playing field is about to change.
Still lost, you know.
But the Queen, I simply must get out.
Oh, but you are outside.
What?
See for yourself.
Why, that's me. I'm asleep. Don't let her get away. Alice, wake up. Please wake up, Alice. Alice. Please wake up, Alice. 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 Alice.
We are so focused on a goal, whether it be passing a test or graduating as first in the class. However, in this way, we do not really learn at our fullest. We do whatever it takes to achieve our original objective. Some of you may be thinking, well, if you pass a test or become valedictorian, didn't you learn something? Well, yes, you learned something, but not all that you could have. Perhaps you only learned how to memorize names, places, and dates to later on forget in order to clear your mind for the next test. School is not all that it can be. Right now, it's a place for most people to determine that their goal out is to get out as soon as possible. I am now accomplishing that goal. I am graduating. I should look at this as a positive experience, especially being at the top of my class. However, in retrospect, I cannot say that I'm any more intelligent than my peers. I can attest that I am only the best at doing what I'm told. Here I stand, and I'm supposed to be proud that I have completed this period of indoctrination. I will leave in the fall, and I will go on to the next phase expected of me in order to receive a paper document that certifies that I'm capable of work. But I can attest that I'm a human being, not just a worker. I'm a thinker, an adventurer. A worker is someone who is trapped within repetition, a slave of the system set up before him. But now I have successfully shown that I was the best slave. I did what I was told to the extreme. While others sat in class and doodled to later become great artists, I sat in class to take notes to become a great test taker. While others would come to class without their homework done because they were reading about an interest of theirs, I never missed an assignment. While others were creating music and writing lyrics, I decided to do extra credit, even though I didn't even need it. So I wonder, why did I even want this position? Sure, I earned it, but what will come of it? When I leave educational institutionalism, will I be successful or forever lost? I have no clue about what I want to do with my life. I have no interest because I saw every subject as a study, as work, and I excelled at every subject just for the purpose of excelling and not learning. And quite frankly, I'm very scared. John Taylor Gatto, a retired school teacher and activist critical of compulsory schooling, asserts, we could encourage the best qualities of youthfulness, curiosity, adventure, resilience, the capacity for surprising insight simply by being more flexible about time, texts, and tests, by introducing kids into truly competent adults, and by giving each student what autonomy he or she needs in order to take a risk every now and then. But we don't do that. Between these cinder block walls, we are all expected to be the same. We are trained to ace every standardized test, and those who deviate and see light through a different lens are worthless to the scheme of public education, and therefore viewed with contempt. H.L. Mencken wrote in the American Mercury for April 1924 that the aim of public education is not to fill the young of this species with knowledge and awaken their intelligence. Nothing could be further from the truth. The aim is simply to reduce as many individuals as possible to the same safe level, to breed and train a standardized citizenry, to put down dissent and originality. That is the aim in the United States. To illustrate this idea, doesn't it perturb you to learn about the idea of critical thinking? Is there really such a thing as uncritically thinking? To think is to process information in order to form an opinion. But if we are not critical when processing this information, are we really thinking? Or are we mindlessly accepting other opinions as truth? This was happening to me, and if it wasn't for the rare occurrence of an avant-garde 10th grade English teacher, Donna Bryan, I would have been doomed. I am now enlightened, but my mind still feels disabled. I must retrain myself and constantly remember how insane this ostensibly sane place really is. And now here I am in a world guided by fear, a world suppressing the uniqueness that lies inside each of us, a world where we can either acquiesce to the inhuman nonsense of corporatism and materialism or insist on change. We are not enlivened by an educational system that clandestinely sets us up for jobs that could be automated, for work that need not be done, for enslavement without fervency for meaningful achievement. We have no choices in life when money is our motivational force. Our motivational force ought to be passion, but this is lost from the moment we step into a system that trains us rather than inspires us. We are more than robotic bookshelves, conditioned to blurt out facts we were taught in school. We are all very special. Every human on this planet is very special. So aren't we all deserving of something better? Of using our minds for innovation rather than memorization, for creativity rather than futile activity, for rumination rather than stagnation. We are not here to get a degree to then get a job so we can consume industry-approved placation after placation. There is more and more still. The saddest part is that the majority of students don't have the opportunity to reflect as I did. The majority of students are put through the same brainwashing techniques in order to create a complacent labor force working in the interests of large corporations and secretive government. And worst of all, they are completely unaware of it. I will never be able to turn back these 18 years. I can't run away to another country with a different education system, perhaps meant to enlighten rather than condition. This part of my life is over, and I want to make sure that no other child will have his or her potential suppressed by powers meant to exploit and control. We are human beings.
You want answers! I want the truth! You can't handle the truth!
One of Frederick Taylor's descendants, John Taylor Gatto, has rebelled against his forebears' legacy. An award-winning teacher, he has also rebelled against the state of his profession.
The key is the word compulsion. The idea of drawing all children, all young people, into some universal program administered by the leader or the leaders is as old as Plato, probably older. But nowhere on earth was that able to be imposed until Northern Germany, under the military rule of the Prussians, finally imposed that in 1818, so in the second decade of the 19th century. That is the first time. It was announced in other places, but never was it able to be successfully administered, because the idea is so crazy and so damaging inherently that people simply disobeyed the law. The experience of Prussian Germany was that it was possible to convert sovereign human beings into human resources. That's a translation of a German compound. And that by making these people incomplete, making them unable to think in contexts, but they could be converted into specialist tools for management, scientific management. Horace Mann was hired by the railroad and coal interests of New England to bring about compulsion. He had no interest in schooling. He was an ambitious young politician. He did get compulsion laws passed in 1852. Once it was in Massachusetts, it spread very, very slowly. It wasn't for 15 more years that another state followed suit. So it hardly was a gift to the populous portion of America. I smile a little bit when I say that, because the mythology is that it was greeted everywhere with great enthusiasm.
Not only did parents resist compulsory schooling, they sometimes did so violently. So vehement was the opposition in Barnstable on Cape Cod that state militia were brought in to march children to school under armed guard. A primary reason why the mass of the American population resisted compulsory schooling was a widespread belief that its purpose had little to do with education and everything to do with control. Their suspicions were well-founded. An undercurrent of class warfare runs through early American education documents. The U.S. Bureau of Education Circular of Information for April 1872 explains that inculcating knowledge teaches workers to be able to perceive and calculate their grievances, thus making them more redoubtable foes in labor struggles. Such an enabling is bound to retard the growth of industry. 16 years later, in the report of the Senate Committee on Education is equally explicit. We believe that education is one of the principal causes of discontent of late years, manifesting itself among the laboring classes.
The first Red Scare, in my judgment, is the trigger event for the embedment of compulsion schooling in the United States. The Red Scare of 1848 is probably the reason that one American state fell under the compulsion regimen. There are literally thousands of books from the period 1880 to, say, 1920, roughly, that deal with how you scientifically engineer a factory or a church congregation or young people in school. School which followed a general outline of converting kids into obedient tools now took on a very, very mechanistic aspect under this surge of scientific engineering.
In 1903, the Atlantic Monthly called for adoption of scientific management in schools. Prominent education theorist William C. Bagley stressed a need for unquestioned obedience. The new system would train children for life in 20th century America, their role to fulfill the needs of commerce, industry, and government.
In the community with the best education, more shoppers, more merchandise moving, a higher average of per capita sales. In the other community, fewer shoppers. Maybe things will look up in the long run. In the first community, there's a larger magazine circulation per 1,000 population. A much smaller circulation in the second community, a decline in demand. The student of typing, shorthand, and business machines becomes a producer upon graduation, a tax-developed community asset. He prepares for radio and electronics. His future promises a profit on the taxes invested in him. As education raises the cultural level, so it must also introduce youth to the know-how of production and stir interest in precision, efficiency, and service. With graduation, the community receives a new supply of young people who want a better life on the one hand and who have the ability to work for it on the other. Now the tax investment returns to the taxpayer.
In order to aid in the process, the Gary Plan was introduced. It had a new organizational scheme in which different subjects would be taught by different departments. Similar to the breaking down of factory jobs under Taylorism, students would be herded from classroom to classroom in order to digest a stream of standardized factual information. Like Pavlov's dogs, they would do so at the ring of a bell.
Children, go where I send you. Send me, I'm gonna send you one by one. I want but a little bit, a baby, I born by the Virgin Mary. Born in Bethlehem. Children, go where I send you. Where you send me,
The first lesson I saw was the terrible confusion that's in any school as people race about at bell-marked intervals. The time-honored experience of mental development is that it occurs with strong concentration, not with fragmented attention. Class position. You will not find the doctor's son, however ignorant he is, in the class with the marginalized kids. Indifference is wonderful. This is a factory to create indifference to intellectual things, to ideas. They have to be whipped, ordered, and disciplined to do anything. Or, just as bad, they have to be offered bribes to do it. Emotional dependency, sure. Probably half of the 60 million kids who attend school in the United States, removed from their own families at a very vulnerable age, become emotionally dependent on a pat on the head, a smile, avoiding an insult. Intellectual dependency. In spite of rhetoric to the contrary, a teacher's nightmare is invested in those kids, if any, who actually have learned how to think for themselves. The teacher's job is not only to convey bits of information that should not be challenged, but also to convey how you connect those bits of information, but not practice in doing that for yourself. You memorize someone else's connection.
What is a circle? Billy Handler.
A circle is a closed curve in which all endpoints on the circumference are equally distanced from the center points.
Very good.
Provisional self-esteem, this really ties into the grades, the test scores, the signs of approval by the teacher. You're allowed to feel good about yourself if an authority issues a signal that you can do that. On the other hand, if the authority condemns you, the only way you can feel good about yourself is to become an outlaw.
What are we trying to do? If our goal is to help kids become critical thinkers, lifelong learners who really enjoy thinking and reading and playing with numbers and ideas, if we want to help them become good learners and good people who can create and sustain a functioning democracy, then education would look very different from the way it looks right now, at least in our culture. We would have to question the use of grades. What research finds is that when kids are trying to get good grades in school, three things tend to happen. They begin to lose interest in the learning itself. Now the purpose is just to get a good grade rather than to engage with the question or problem at hand. Second, they tend to think less deeply and retain knowledge for a shorter period of time compared to kids who don't have any grades. And third, they tend to pick the easiest possible tasks. That's not because they're being lazy, it's because they're being rational. If we tell kids we want to see a better report card, we want to see higher grades, naturally they'll pick the shortest book or the easiest project because that maximizes the chance of achieving that goal. So regardless of what your goal is, if you're interested in assessing kids and teachers and schools to see are we doing a good job here, you would never need tests in order to see whether kids are learning and where they need help, and you would never need grades to report the results of the evaluation we place on those assessments. We would certainly do away with standardized testing, the kind of testing used in particular states or provinces where everyone takes the same test and then you compare everyone's scores. These tests tend to measure what matters least. It tends to be a good marker for family income because what standardized tests mostly measure is the size of the houses near a school. But it's the case that some of our deepest thinking kids just don't do well on tests. And some kids who get great scores have never had an original idea in their lives.
Well, I thought you just judged by tests.
Oh, no. There are many other things besides tests that we use. Of course, we do consider a child's general ability and the way he scores on standardized tests, but that's not all.
Competition builds character. In fact, what we find is that by any reasonable notion of character in terms of psychological health or self-esteem, that competition undermines that and creates a kind of neurosis, because we come to think of ourselves as good and competent only to the extent that we have defeated other people. And so we're always playing this desperate king of the mountain game, where we're worried about triumphing over other people and stepping on their faces and looking at them as if they're going to step on our faces. Now, that has two effects. One is it's horrible for us in terms of psychological development, because there's a perpetual sense of disease and anxiety. But second, it very logically has a destructive effect on our relationships. We compete because we're raised that way, not because we're born that way. I mean, take, for example, the belief in survival of the fittest, which is seen as a Darwinian notion. In fact, Charles Darwin never even used the phrase survival of the fittest. That was coined by a right-wing social thinker in the 19th century named Herbert Spencer, who tried to corrupt Darwin's thinking to his own reactionary political purposes. What Darwin talked about was natural selection, which means that the individual organism that's best able to adapt to a changing environment is more likely to be around to survive and reproduce. But that doesn't specify competition as a mechanism. In fact, often the active avoidance of competition, if not the deliberate pursuit of cooperative strategies, turns out to make it more likely that organisms and entire species will survive. The research consistently shows that competition not only isn't necessary for excellence, but tends to impede excellence on most tasks. And the more challenging the task, the more ingenuity, problem-solving skill it requires, the more competition tends to disrupt that achievement. Excellence pulls in one direction, and competition pulls in another. And in fact, another kind of research study corroborates that. If you take a whole bunch of people and give them a task to do, some kind of problem to work out, and half of them are told, see if you can figure out how to do this task, and the other half are told, this is a contest with a prize to whoever wins, whoever does the best job, study after study after study across cultures, across gender, across ages, find that the people who compete, who have to compete, end up doing an inferior job on that task. At the moment, it appears as though much of what happens in schools in North America is really for the convenience of people who have most of the power. There is, if anything, an active discouragement of critical questioning. Corporations claim they want kids who are able to think outside the box, but only so far as they're caught within a larger box that works to the advantage of the free market, which means that the market economy, based on competition, based on economic rather than human considerations, ends up controlling the system.
Today, many people assume that antisocial and even violent behavior by young people is a completely natural phenomenon. Yet anthropological studies reveal this to be a myth. Our widespread use of the term juvenile delinquency exposes not only the failure of modern schooling, but of an important concept given expression by the behaviorists. They called it the frustration-aggression hypothesis. The frustration-aggression hypothesis was an attempt by behaviorists at Yale to combine their own science of behavior with that of the Freudians. Simply put, when people perceive that they are being prevented from achieving just rewards, their frustration is likely to turn to aggression. This study, by the behaviorist Hobart Maurer, showed that when rats could not achieve their expected reward, they began to take out their frustrations on each other. The scientist notes that two animals which have lost their hold on the pellet, frustration, will be seen to turn on each other, displaced aggression. Similarly, in a 1941 experiment, toys were placed behind a wire screen where children could see but not touch them. When they eventually gained access to the toys, their play became considerably more destructive. On the one hand, human beings are not rats. Armed with the necessary information, we can come to a logical conclusion about who is to blame for our frustrations in life. Rightly or wrongly, we often point the finger squarely back at ourselves. Yet in the hands of politicians and demagogues, frustration and aggression can be a potent tool in deflecting anger onto scapegoats.
دانش آموزان عزیز صبح بخیر. این مدیرتون است که صحبت میکنه. زیاد وقت کلاستون رو نمیگیرم. فقط میخوام اعلام کنم که از امروز تغییراتی در دروس شما رخ خواهد داد. معلمین گرامی این تغییرات رو به توجهتان میرسانند. درخواست من از همه شما عزیزان این است که با هوشیاری آموزش‌های معلم خود را آویزه گوش کنید. مطمئن هستم که شما هم برای خود و هم برای کل مدرسه افتخار آفرین خواهید بود. با تشکر.
ساکت. نظم کلاسی حفظ کنین. این درس اول امروزه. 2 به علاوه 2 مساوی 5. حالا تکرار کنیم. 2 با 2 میشه 5. 2 با 2 چند میشه؟ 5 میشه. بلندتر. 2 با 2 چند میشه؟ 5 میشه. بلندتر. چند میشه؟
5 میشه.
تکرار کنیم. 2 با 2 چند میشه؟
5 میشه.
چیه پسر؟
آقا اجازه مگه 2 با 2 4 نمیشه؟
من دارم به تو میگم 2 با 2 5 میشه. پس چه سوال نیست. فهمیدی؟
آقا فقط فکر کردیم که
فکر نکن. نمیخواد فکر کنی. 2 با 2 5 میشه. حالا بشین حرف نزن. دفتراتون رو باز کنین و بنویسین. 2 به علاوه 2.
آقا اجازه 2 به علاوه 2 میشه 4. وقتی همه چی 4 میشه چطوری ممکنه یه دفعه 5 بشه؟
اصلا کی به تو چیز حرف داد؟ به چه حقی من از سوال میبری؟
آقا فقط میخواستم بگم
2 با 2 5 میشه. تکرار کن.
ولی آقا روی تخته
تکرار کن.
2 به علاوه 2
رو به تخته.
4. همتون میدونین که 4 میشه.
تخته رو نگاه کن.
تو هم که میدونین 4 میشه چیزی نمیگی.
سکوت. چون نخور تو برگردم.
چکشه بابا. ای میخوای همه تو در سر بندازی. خیلی عصبیش کردم یا پدرشو در میاره.
این دانش آموز فکر کنه از همه بهتر میدونه. خیلی روش زیاده. بگو ببینم پسر 2 با 2 چند میشه؟
آقا اجازه 4 میشه آقا.
شنیدی؟ باورتون میشه؟ این دانش آموزان از ممتازترین دانش آموزان مدرسه‌ن. الگوی این مدرسه‌ن. یه ذره از اینا یاد بگیریم. بگیم ببینم 2 با 2 چند میشه؟
آقا اجازه 5 میشه آقا.
آفرین. بیا اینجا پسر. حالا حاصل جمع چند میشه؟ جواب صحیح رو بنویس. این آخرین فرصت. دیگه هم هست که دست میزونه هم باشه. نگاه کن. ببریم بیرون. دفتراتون رو باز کنه بنویسین. 2 به علاوه 2 مساوی 5. همینطور که می‌نویسین تکرار کنین. 2 با 2 چند میشه؟ 5 میشه. چند میشه؟ بلندتر چند میشه؟
5 میشه.
بلندتر چند میشه؟
5 میشه.
بلندتر چند میشه؟
5 میشه.
چند میشه؟ 2 با 2 5. تکرار کنین.
Behavioral psychologists have come up with new views, not only of animal behavior, but of human nature as well. And these views all concern a process that we take for granted, learning, because we are all truly born to learn. Ironically, one of the most important figures in the study of learning, Ivan Pavlov, wasn't concerned with the subject at all, at least not at first. Pavlov, a noted Russian scientist, won the Nobel Prize for Physiology and Medicine in 1904. As this original footage shows, Pavlov was initially interested in digestion and the action of the salivary glands. By diverting the saliva of dogs into test tubes, he could precisely measure if and how much they salivated during digestion. When food was presented, the dogs salivated quickly, an inherited salivary reflex. But over repeated testings, a strange thing happened. The dogs salivated before contact with the food. Just the sight of the food was enough to stimulate their drooling. Then, just seeing the food dish, or even hearing the footsteps of Pavlov or his assistants, was enough to trigger this built-in reflex. What was going on to elicit this response? Pavlov decided to find out by systematically varying the stimuli and measuring the dog's reaction. Metronomes, lights, and bells were all used as stimuli, and they all worked as stand-ins for the food. What mattered was not the kind of stimulus that was used, but the fact that it reliably signaled that food was on the way. Pavlov had discovered a fundamental type of learning called classical conditioning. An original stimulus elicits an automatic, unlearned response. Both stimulus and response happen naturally. They are unconditioned. Then a second, neutral stimulus that never elicits the unconditioned response by itself is introduced just before the presentation of the original stimulus. If the neutral or signaling stimulus is presented alone, and a response occurs as if the original stimulus were still there, we say that conditioning has taken place. The arbitrary neutral stimulus becomes a conditioned stimulus. The reverse is also true. Pavlov and others studied the extinction over time of such conditioned responses. When the subject learns that the conditioned stimulus no longer signals a desired event, the acquisition process is reversed, as the learned connection is gradually weakened. Pavlov's work and the work of those who followed him led to a remarkable conclusion. and that is any stimulus an organism can perceive is capable of eliciting any reaction the organism is capable of making. This means that virtually any sound, sight, or smell can influence the way our muscles tense or relax, our moods fluctuate, or even the way our attitudes are formed. For instance, if I say, relax, and then do this, you're going to be startled and upset. After 5 or 6 pairings of relax, just saying the word relax is going to generate a negative response rather than its usual learned reaction.
While some scientists engineer shiny new consumer goods for an eager public, Harvard psychologist B.F. Skinner seeks nothing less than the engineering of human nature. In experiments with subjects as simple as pigeons, Skinner declares that with the right social engineering, we can create a new breed of human being. Skinner is firmly in the behaviorist tradition pioneered by John Watson in the 1920s. Like Watson, Skinner contends that with the right tools, we can predict and control behavior.
Skinner really inherited the mantle from Watson of behaviorism in this country, but it's kind of interesting to think about how there's a subtle difference in the way they went about it. Watson, as we know, ended up becoming an advertising executive, ended up embracing the American value system as it existed. Skinner was different. Skinner was a visionary. Skinner felt that through behaviorism, he could influence the world towards a greater humanity, not meet humanity where it was, but take humanity to a new place through the principles of behaviorism.
Picking up where Watson left off, Skinner wants to do the rigorous science to prove that environment is everything. Change the environment, he argues, and you can change the individual. Or in Skinner's case, the pigeon.
Skinner himself was a born gadgeteer. He had, in his own early years, as a boy, for example, he developed ways of sorting ripe, I think it was cranberries, from unripe cranberries. He invented a cannon that would shoot things over his neighbor's fence. This was the kind of man he was. He was developing new ways to do everyday things in ways that were more comfortable, more efficient.
During World War II, Skinner had developed a pigeon guidance device for the U.S. military. While the Russians had dogs carrying bombs, and the Swedes had seals to blow up mines, Skinner had a plan of his own. Teaching pigeons to guide missiles to an enemy target. At the time, however, the military had no missiles to guide. But Skinner's pigeon research did not go to waste. He develops a system called operant conditioning to prove that a behavior will be repeated by a subject when rewarded. Repetition leads to reinforcement. Reinforcement to changes in behavior.
This hungry pigeon is moving about more or less at random. Sometimes it turns its head to the left. When it does, we reinforce that movement by giving the pigeon access to a dish of grain.
Skinner then waits for it to turn further. Again, more food. Ultimately, the pigeon will turn in a complete circle, having learned that only when he turns will he be rewarded.
What Skinner was able to do in very carefully controlled studies with animal models was they demonstrate that whole chains of behaviors could be built step by step so that literally you could teach a pigeon to do complicated behaviors that no one would have predicted possible.
And Skinner believes that if it works for pigeons, why not people? In Skinner's mind, behavior is behavior, up and down the evolutionary scale, and it is all learned. One of the great successes is in education. People are taught to do more complicated tasks than anyone had thought possible by breaking down behavior into small steps and giving positive reinforcement along the way.
The essence of Skinner's work was that we could manipulate the environment in ways that would permit us to produce any kind of behavior that we wished, and we could develop individuals in ways that made every possible future open to them.
The idea that anything is possible.
Okay, so life is worth living and the glass is half full. But Bertolt Brecht said, the man who is laughing has not yet heard the bad news. Hi, Nick.
Hi.
Nicholas Carr.
Thank you. Thank you, Moses. Thank all of you very much. Let me start by asking how many of you have a smartphone either on your person or near your person right now? It's pretty much unanimous. Well, my goal is by the end of my talk, when you go out for your lunch break, I want you all to go out, following the example of Network, all go out onto the sidewalk and smash your smartphones. But that might be setting the bar too high, so at least think about smashing your smartphones. We humans crave information. We crave it the way we crave sex, way down deep in our synapses, deep in our neurons. There have been studies that show that whenever we find a new piece of information, or even when we go out and seek a new piece of information, a little bit of dopamine is released in our brain. And as you probably know, dopamine is a pleasure-producing chemical, neurotransmitter, very, very important to brain function, but also implicated in pretty much all kinds of addictions. What dopamine basically does is encourages you to do something over and over again by making it pleasing. So we have what seems to be a very deep instinct to seek out and gather as much information as quickly as possible. And when you think about it, I think it becomes clear pretty quickly why this evolved in our brains, why this instinct. I mean, when you think about what it must have been like in hunter-gatherer times, or earlier than that even, being able to find new information, to know everything that was going on around you, probably increased substantially the odds of your survival. You wanted to see that tiger before it jumped on you, or you wanted to see that little berry bush so you could have dinner for the evening and stay alive. So we have, deep in our biology, this desire to know everything that's going on around us. And that's amplified by another very basic instinct, our social instinct. We get rewards when we know what other people are thinking about us, what conversation is going on around us. Even just having more information than other people makes us socially attractive, raises our social status. So we have these very deep instincts to go out and gather as much information as possible. And for most of human history, that was fine. In fact, the reason they call them survival instincts is they add to our odds of survival. But think about what we've done in recent years. We've created, essentially, this new environment in which we live more and more, a digital environment that we enter through our smartphones, that we enter through our computers, our tablets, that's all wrapped up with social media and the internet. We've created an environment of unlimited information. And then we've geared that environment to push information to us all the time through our phones and other devices, from Google or from Facebook or from Twitter or whatever. So we have this instinct, this very primitive instinct, to want to know everything that's going on around us, and then we've created an environment in which there's no end to new information that's out there. And what we begin to see very, very quickly is this, compulsive kind of behavior. And my guess is, since most of you walk around with cell phones or smartphones all the time, you've probably seen that kind of compulsive behavior in yourselves. Pulling out your phone, even when nothing's going on and there's not even any particular reason to do it, you'll pull it out just to see, who knows, maybe there's something going on. And certainly if there's any indication that you've got a new message or a new notification, well, you'll pull out your phone. And for a lot of people, the last thing they do before they go to bed, check your phone or your computer. First thing they do when they get up, check your phone or computer. And if you have a bad night's sleep and wake up at 2 in the morning, well, you might as well check it then, too, because something interesting could have happened. And when you look at the science of our behavior, you see all sorts of evidence that, in fact, this is taking place. There have been studies of how long people spend on looking at individual web pages when they're browsing the web or Googling stuff, looking for information. It's about 10 seconds. And that includes the time it takes for the page to load. And what's very interesting in that research is it doesn't matter how much information or even how good the information is on the web page. The researchers, in one study, they added a lot of text or added a lot of images. The time people stayed on the individual page stayed at about 10 seconds. So clearly what you want to do is grab the gist of what's on the page, then find a link and click and go somewhere else so you can get some new information. There was an interesting study of what happens when people have computers in front of them at work. This was a few years ago. Researchers went out. They wanted to find out how often people glance at their email inbox. First, they asked the people, how often do you glance at your email inbox? And people said, 2 or 3 times an hour. Then they put these eye-tracking goggles on them that actually tracked where their focus was, and they found that people glanced at their email inbox 20 to 30 times an hour, 10 times more than they were even conscious of. So every couple of minutes. If you look at studies of teenagers in their phones and texting, you find that the average teenager sends or receives about 3,300 texts a month these days. For teenage girls, it's actually over 4,000 texts a month. And that breaks down to one text about every 6 minutes throughout your entire waking life. And if you think adults show any more restraint around their gadgets, well, forget it, because the latest studies of how often an adult will pull out his or her smartphone and look at it during the course of the day, it's about 160 times, which works out to about once every 6 minutes during your waking life. And as we know from that email study, that's almost surely an understatement, because people consult their phones, consult the internet, consult social media all the time without even consciously realizing they're doing it. Well, this kind of behavior is very good for internet companies. If you're Google or Twitter or Facebook, you want people to constantly be checking their phone, constantly go online. You don't want people to stay put at any place for very long. And the reason for that is that these companies, and almost all internet companies, make more money the more quickly we jump from bit of information to bit of information. That's when they gather more information about us, and that's also when they gain new opportunities to show us the advertisements that ultimately fund their businesses. So this is very good for internet companies, but what about for ourselves and the way we think and the way we use our minds? You might say, well, we're just adapting to a new technology. We've had new technologies, new information technologies, new media technologies for hundreds of years now. Every time one comes along, we adapt our way of thinking to suit the technology. And so we're becoming, maybe it's good to be scatterbrained. Maybe it's good to be distracted all the time and interrupted all the time. And we're optimizing our mind to live in this new environment. I think there's a lot of truth to that. I think we are very good at adapting. We have flexible, malleable minds. But we need to look at the downsides. Because even if we adapt, that doesn't mean that we end up better people or better thinkers after that process of adaptation. And if we look at what the internet and all this technology is actually doing to the way we think, the picture gets much, much darker. And it all has to do with how our brains transform information, mere information, into knowledge, giving us the ability to think deeply, to think rich thoughts, to think conceptually and critically. And the way this happens really has a lot to do with two forms of memory. On the one hand, you have what's called your working memory, and that's basically the contents of your conscious mind at any given moment. It's what you're thinking about. And what we know about working memory is it has a very, very tiny capacity. You can only fit about 2 to 4 elements of information in your conscious mind at any given moment. And then the other form of memory is what we refer to when we refer to memory, which is our long-term memory. And this has an enormous capacity. In fact, nobody's ever filled up their long-term memory. Nobody's ever said, that's it, can't remember anything anymore, it's full. So it's incredibly expansive, incredibly large. And the key to deep thinking is being able to take the information that's coming into your mind from what you're learning, the conversations you're having, what you're reading, this very, very small capacity of working memory, and transfer it to your long-term memory. And that's a process called memory consolidation. And it's only during memory consolidation that you connect that new piece of information to everything else you've learned and thought and experienced in your life. And it turns out knowledge isn't about these fragments of information that we can pick up all the time today. It's about the connections and associations that we make inside our own brains among all the pieces of information we gather. It's only when you make those connections that you get rich thinking, rich knowledge. Maybe, if you're lucky, you even end up with some wisdom. The problem is that there is a break. It's very easy to break this consolidation process. Because you have such a small capacity in your conscious mind, if you're overloaded with information, nothing stays there very, very long. Because in order to take in that new tweet or notification or Facebook update or Google result, you have to clear out something that's already in your conscious mind. And what we know about the consolidation process is it only happens when we're attentive, only happens when we concentrate for some period of time on new information. It's attention that triggers the transfer of information to our long-term memory and allows us to create all of these connections. And what we've created for ourselves with this rich, vibrant digital environment is a constant source of disruption, interruption, distraction. That means we're never keeping information long enough in our attention to form these rich connections. And this is more than just a theoretical concern. We see growing bodies of scientific evidence that show this happening. There was a very important study done a few years ago at Stanford in California where the researchers gathered two groups of people. One people who spent a lot of time online, a lot of time multitasking, glancing from one message to another. They called these the heavy multitaskers. And another group of people that did much less of that, which they called the light multitaskers. They gave these two groups of people 6 standard basic tests of cognitive function. How deeply they thought, how well they thought. The heavy multitaskers did worse on all 6 of the tests. One of the tests was a test of multitasking skill itself. Heavy multitaskers did worse on the multitasking test. Although if you ask them, they say, oh, I'm great at multitasking. I do it all the time. What really happens is that they're burning up all their mental energy, switching from one thing to another. And if they just focused for a little while on one thing, they would perform much, much better. But to me, the most interesting, most revealing of these tests was one that examined how well people are able to distinguish important information from trivia. And here, the heavy multitaskers performed much worse than the light multitaskers. And what the scientists theorize, and I think this makes complete sense, is that the more time we spend jumping from bit of information to bit of information every couple of minutes during our day, the less we worry about how important something is, and the more we're simply attracted to whatever's new. So it's the new thing that grabs our attention. For instance, if it's a nice little cat video, you'll go to the cat video. You won't focus, even if you have something very important, very interesting in front of you. And so that's what we've created for ourselves, is this world in which, thanks to our technology, we're constantly subverting our ability to think our deepest, most profound thoughts. And there was another study done a couple of years ago in which a woman named Patricia Greenfield at the University of California at Los Angeles went out and examined 50 different experiments that had been done over the years to see how different technologies, different media influence the way we think. What she concluded was that there is a benefit for all this time we spend online. We seem to have greater visual acuity. And what's meant by that is we can shift our focus more quickly among more images, more things on a screen than we were able to do before. But the trade-off here, what we lose in optimizing our brain for shifting our attention, is what she described as mindful knowledge acquisition, creative thinking, reflective thinking, critical thinking. Now, however much we might appreciate that we've optimized our brains to shift our focus very quickly, I think most of us would agree that those things, mindful knowledge acquisition, the ability to think critically and to think conceptually and deeply, those are really the fundamental aspects of the highest forms of human thinking. And essentially, by becoming slaves to our technology, we've cut ourselves off more and more from those highest forms of thinking. I'd even argue that as a society, we're starting to pretend that that doesn't matter. We place all our focus on the speed with which we can gather new information. And that's always been a very important part of being intelligent, to gather new information. But it's only the first stage of using your mind in the fullest way possible. The second and more important stage is actually to cut yourself off, to screen yourself from all that incoming information and consider deeply, think deeply about what you've discovered. And it's that second process, more important process, that is fading more and more away from us. And as I argue, as a society, we're kind of saying, oh, that doesn't matter. What matters is the speed of the consumption of information. So if there's the one overarching danger that I think we face as individuals and as a society in our dependency on on our smartphones and our computers and the web, it's that we're sacrificing our ability to determine for ourselves what our minds focus on, what we pay attention to. We're ceding that incredibly important function to the technology itself. And we know that Facebook and all these other companies are happy to take over that function for you, happy to determine what you look at. But it seems to me if we sacrifice that fundamental quality of our mind, the ability to determine for ourselves what we're going to think about and how much time we're going to spend thinking about it, then for all the gains the internet has given us, we'll be sacrificing perhaps the most important thing that governs the depth of our thought. Thank you very much. Thanks. Thank you. Thank you.
So I bet now you're not so sure.
Well, now it's all coming out in everyone's face, probably because at this point, it's not going to change anything anyways. But you have these high-ranking Facebook officials, including co-creator Sean Parker, telling everybody flat out, in not mincing words at all, people are literally being programmed by Facebook. First, we have Parker. You know what? Just listen to this.
And they would say, I'm not on social media. And I would say, okay, you will be. And then they would say, no. I value my real life interactions. I value the moment. I value presence, and I value intimacy. And I would say, well, you're a conscientious objector. That's okay. You don't have to participate, but we'll get you eventually. and like, I don't know if I really understood the consequences of what I was saying. Because the unintended consequences of a network when it grows to 1 billion or 2 billion people, and it literally changes your relationship with society, with each other, with it probably interferes with productivity in weird ways. God only knows what it's doing to our children's brains. If the thought process that went into building these applications, Facebook being the first of them to really understand it, that thought process was all about how do we consume as much of your time and conscious attention as possible. And that means that we need to sort of give you a little dopamine hit every once in a while because someone liked or commented on a photo or a post or whatever. And that's going to get you to contribute more content, and that's going to get you, more likes and comments. I mean, it's a social validation feedback loop. I mean, it's exactly the kind of thing that a hacker like myself would come up with, because you're exploiting a vulnerability in human psychology.
It bears repeating. He's saying Facebook puts people into a social validation feedback loop, a dopamine-driven social validation feedback loop. It has a reaction with people's brains that changes the way that they interact. Not only that, but he went on to say they did it consciously.
And I think that the inventors, creators, and it's me, it's Mark, it's the, Kevin Systerman, Instagram, it's all of these people, understood this consciously, and we did it anyway.
That's right. They knew they were doing this to people, and they did it anyways.
We need to sort of give you a little dopamine hit every once in a while. It's a social validation feedback loop. Understood this consciously, and we did it anyway.
And he's just telling everyone. I guess maybe he's assuaging his guilt. I don't know. But they did this to people on purpose. A few weeks after Parker made his statement, you have this guy, whose name I'm probably going to butcher, unfortunately, Chamath Palihapitiya? Does that sound right? Palihapitiya. He worked on Facebook from 2005 to 2011 and ended up with the title Vice President of User Growth. And he came out after Sean Parker came out, and he doubled down on what Parker said, saying, quote, "I think we've created tools that are ripping apart the social fabric of how society works." Direct quote.
I feel tremendous guilt. I think we all knew in the back of our minds, even though we feigned this whole line of like, there probably aren't any really bad unintended consequences. I think in the back, deep recesses of our minds, we kind of knew something bad could happen. But I think the way we defined it was not like this. It literally is a point now where I think we have created tools that are ripping apart the social fabric of how society works. That is truly where we are.
But hold on, we gotta finish listening to this guy.
The short-term dopamine-driven feedback loops that we have created are destroying how society works. No civil discourse, no cooperation, misinformation, mistruth. And it's not an American problem. This is not about Russian ads. This is a global problem.
These are not just innocuous pastimes. That's the thing. People just think this is a way to spend their time. It's not, and they're telling you straight up. He continued.
We are in a really bad state of affairs right now, in my opinion. It is eroding the core foundations of how people behave by and between each other.
Have you ever tried to talk to a person when they're on Facebook or Twitter? You can't. It's like the person's not really there. They're physically there, you can see them, but mentally, there might as well be a gone fishing sign across their forehead. They're not there. And it's getting worse. It's like people are just disappearing.
And I don't have a good solution. My solution is I just don't use these tools anymore. I haven't for years. My Facebook feed, I've posted maybe 2 times in 7 years. 3 times, 5 times. It's less than 10. And it's weird. I guess I kind of just innately didn't want to get programmed. But everybody else has to soul search a little bit more about what you're willing to do, because your behaviors, you don't realize it, but you are being programmed.
So this is now 2 high-ranking Facebook officials, including the guy who co-created it, saying this is meant to program people.
Now you got to decide how much you're willing to give up, how much of your intellectual independence. And don't think, oh yeah, not me, I'm a genius, I'm at Stanford. You're probably the most likely to fall for it. Because you were checkboxing your whole life. No offense, guys.
None taken.
Look at this man's face. These people are laughing at him like this is a funny joke. He is not kidding. He's serious. He's been serious this whole time. And these people out in the audience are just like, ha ha ha, Facebook. They're totally, it's going over, it's like right over their head like an airplane, just they're missing it. They're not obviously getting it, what he's trying to tell them here. And he's being pretty straightforward, actually. And when he talked about his kids, you know what he told the Stanford crowd?
I can control my decisions, which is I don't use this shit. I can control my kids' decisions, which is they're not allowed to use this shit.
Straight up, my kids are not allowed to use it. And this is a good point that everyone needs to understand, because I think even the people who realize Facebook is bad and they call it spy book and they say, oh, they just want to get all your information. That is true. Parker said they just want to keep you on there as long as possible so you'll give up as much information about yourself as possible, right? But he refers to himself as a hacker. He says a hacker like me is exploiting your psychology or whatever. But what does he really mean? He says it in a real strange way. But what does that actually mean when you think about what the words that are actually coming out of this guy's mouth? He's a hacker. What is it that he's hacking if he's exploiting human psychology?
We're exploiting a vulnerability in human psychology.
He's hacking you, and he's telling everyone that's what they did. They hacked us. And he's admitting it. It's pretty amazing, actually. You're not just giving something out to Facebook, you're also getting something back. That's how a feedback loop works. So it's not just you giving up all of your personal information and what you had for breakfast today. Something else is coming back to you. And that's the programming. A lot of people are unaware of how programming works or why they call it programming. But they mean it literally. In one of the first articles I wrote at True Stream Media back in 2013, back when we had time to keep up with the website and we weren't trying to finish this film, I ran down how this man named Herbert Krugman, who worked at General Electric, he was the corporate manager of public opinion research there. He did a bunch of studies in the late 60s on the effect of television programming, because they also call television remember they called it a TV program, television programming. In these studies, he looked at what this programming does to people's brains when they watch it. And he had a paper titled, The Impact of Television Advertising, Learning Without Involvement. Learning without involvement. And he said, quote, there's a myth in the advertising world that viewers will forget your message if you don't repeat your advertising often enough. It is this myth that supports many large advertising expenditures. I would rather say that the public comes closer to forgetting nothing they have seen on TV. They just put it out of their minds until and unless it has some use. And then the response to the commercial continues.
I'm sorry, Dave.
So once you've experienced something, whether it's on a movie screen, a TV screen, a computer screen, a smartphone screen, your brain isn't just desensitized to that information. You have now effectively learned that information.
This is the construct.
And maybe not consciously, but your brain remembers that information forever. So why programming? Well, it seems to me that it works like this. Your brain doesn't just process all of the information coming in from your senses and then use the sum of all that information taken in to make decisions and react to the reality around you on a continuous basis all day long. But when it makes those decisions for you, your brain also is now filtering through everything you've seen on TV and movies, on the news, and whatever effect, conscious or subconsciously, that information has had on you personally. I think this is part of why people have such bad relationships, because they think that their relationship is supposed to be like what it is on TV. And so they fight about things that probably have nothing to do with their actual real life. It's based on their perception that they now have been programmed with by watching, I don't know, whatever, romantic comedies or soap operas or whatever. I'm trying to just explain in a very basic sense programming so that when we hear somebody like Sean Parker say Facebook is programming us, we kind of have at least a basic idea of what he's saying. This concept that I'm talking about is what makes technologically driven propaganda especially effective, because we're doing it to ourselves. And let's face it, the majority of our society, like I said, gets a whole lot of their opinions fed to them by the TV and by the internet now, and places like Facebook. Here's an example specifically Facebook related. So on my Facebook wall in recent weeks, I've noticed that it goes through peculiar phases. For example, after the last mass shooting, we just keep having all these mass shootings. I can't even keep it straight how many mass shootings we've had now, but after the last mass shooting, I noticed there were a whole bunch of posts, sponsored and otherwise, promoting gun control even though I know for a fact that people I'm friends with, the core group of people on there, are constitutionalists at the very least, libertarians, voluntary anarchists, people who do not agree the government should limit the Second Amendment rights. So why is that stuff showing up on there? I think it's because I posted something about gun control and how they're using all of these things to push gun control. Another week, it was a bunch of posts just generally ragging on conspiracy theorists and hoaxers and trying to conflate the term false flag with the word hoax and all this kind of stuff, and basically pushing the idea that anyone who discusses false flags is a tinfoil nut job. There was another week where I definitely posted something about pet vaccines, and then all of a sudden on my home wall the next day, I had all these posts about crazy anti-vaxxers. In this way, it really seems to me that at the very least, Facebook is being used to correct people's politically incorrect opinions based on whatever the agenda of the system is. And it's not just doing that. According to Sean Parker, it's merging it with a Pavlovian conditioned response through a dopamine-driven social validation feedback loop. Again, 2 billion people a month use this, and the average person spends 6 hours a week on it. So that's 6 hours a week of social programming.
Bad actors can now manipulate large swaths of people to do anything you want.
And if you don't see what I'm trying to say at this point, I'm going to go ahead and reiterate again, as I've said in past videos, that Facebook has admitted to carrying out social research on its users.
Facebook secretly conducted a massive psychological experiment on nearly 700,000 users,
which is part of what happens when you sign up for Facebook. You give your consent to being part of these things. It's buried in the user agreement. You automatically opt in to being a guinea pig for Facebook's social research, and they don't have to tell you first when they're going to do something. They just do it.
Every user essentially grants the social network permission to conduct these kinds of experiments when they create their accounts.
If you're using Facebook, you're part of that. You don't have a say. You cannot opt out. There's no opting out. Because besides just getting all of this information on everyone, that's also just the point of Facebook. And they've done these studies, and they've admitted, and they've released it to the public, and they've said, look, we found we can turn people's moods up and down by purposefully loading your Facebook wall with either good or bad news. If they fill someone's wall with positive information, it'll garner a positive response from the user, right? But conversely, if they put a bunch of negative stuff on there that upsets you, it's going to make you upset and put you in a bad mood, and then the stuff you post is going to be negative stuff. Which, again, even that might not seem like a big deal to some people, but you need to think about it in terms of 2 billion people are using this a month. And many of them are using it for 6 hours a week. And I guess that'd be bad enough by itself. To me, by itself, that's bad enough, okay? That is bad enough if Facebook stays in its current form. Now, add the fact that Facebook hired former Google and DARPA agent Regina Dugan, who came out last year. She was hired for their top secret Building 8 project. Well, she came out last year and announced what that is. Facebook is attempting to create a mind-reading device so its users can think their Facebook posts directly into the platform without having to type anything.
So what if you could type directly from your brain? It sounds impossible, but it's closer than you may realize. Now, to be clear, we are not talking about decoding your random thoughts. That might be more than any of us care to know. We're talking about decoding those words, the ones you've already decided to share, by sending them to the speech center of your brain. In a few years' time, we expect to demonstrate a real-time silent speech system capable of delivering 100 words per minute.
So tell me that's not like a cross between the Borg,
your culture will adapt to service us. Resistance is futile.
And Invasion of the Body Snatchers, and that scene out of SpongeBob movie where they put the mind control bucket helmets on everyone. Which, I get it. I use these clips all the time, guys. But you know what? I only show these clips so much on this channel because it's just so fitting to what is actually happening right now. This is the reality that we are now living in. And now they're just openly admitting it. Now they're just openly, blatantly telling everyone in their face that that's what they're doing.
And instead what it really is fake brittle popularity. That's short-term and that leaves you even more, and admit it, vacant and empty before you did it. Because then it forces you into this vicious cycle where you're like, what's the next thing I need to do now? Think about that compounded by 2 billion people. And then think about how people react then to the perceptions of others. It's really bad. It's really, really bad.
And, you know, it's great that Sean Parker claims he feels guilty or whatever, but this is the same as handing out a bunch of crack and then waiting 14 years until everyone's good and addicted to crack, and then going, oh, hey, I'm sorry about that. That crack is actually really bad for your mind, and it's affecting the way that you interact socially. I didn't mean to give you that, Chris. Sorry about that. I should have probably warned you about that 14 years ago.
Once again, things that could have been brought to my attention yesterday!
Nope, they did it consciously. They're consciously programming everyone.
Consciously. And we did it anyway.
People make jokes about the global hive mind, but have you seen the Facebook logo that Mark Zuckerberg wears on the inside of his hoodie? This hoodie thing with Mark Zuckerberg, by the way, happened at the D8 conference, which is referred to as the Ultra-Lux All Things Digital Conference. It's one of those conferences that is attended by people like Zuckerberg and Google's Eric Schmidt and DARPA's Regina Dugan that I mentioned earlier, and Microsoft, and all those people. They come to this thing every year. Well, the following year at the D9 conference, they gave out another hoodie as a callback to this Mark Zuckerberg hoodie moment in the swag bag, and this time it had an upside down pentagram on it with a goat's head in it inside of an all-seeing eye pyramid, with the eye being a girl's head with a smartphone or something over one of her eyes, as if her new eye will now be this camera or this cell phone or whatever that's going to be the new intermediary between her outside reality and her brain, and a Latin phrase that CNET claims roughly means, I cease blabbering and pay attention. Yeah, of course, because who's actually paying attention? Obviously not that many. It's not that many people. Definitely not the people who spend the equivalent of a full-time shift at a job on Facebook every week. And the people running this, they know that. They know that people aren't paying attention, and they can act like this whole thing is just a big joke. Ha ha, little Satanism, funny, funny. But is it when they just keep using biblical references?
Apple, the personal computer.
The Latin phrase they put on there is stop talking and pay attention. The world is getting weird, fast. And that weirdness is only going to accelerate in the coming years, with billions of people being exposed on a continuous basis to internet-driven programming. I just don't see what the difference is between this, really, and those Cold War experiments they did with the rats who were getting brain stimulation by pushing a pedal, and they would just keep pushing the pedal and pushing the pedal and pushing the pedal. They got the rat to do it to themselves. And I don't see what the difference is here, really. To me, this is based on the exact same type of situation. And I guess the only question I have left about all this stuff is, who do you think warned us better about the society we're living in today? Do you think it was George Orwell, Aldous Huxley, or the Bible? Anyway, I guess I just felt the need to say all that, because I saw that and people do not understand the scope and gravity of what's happening right now. There's a reason that I have said many times, it's World War I, World War II, WWW. Anyway, I love you guys, and I gotta get back to finishing this movie now.
We're exploiting a vulnerability in human psychology.
The short-term dopamine-driven feedback loops that we have created are destroying how society works. That is truly where we are.
It literally changes your relationship with society, with each other.
It is eroding the core foundations of how people behave by and between each other. But everybody else has to soul search a little bit more about what you're willing to do, because your behaviors, you don't realize it, but you are being programmed. If you feed the beast, that beast will destroy you. If you push back on it, we have a chance to control it and rein it in. And it is a point in time where people need to hard break from some of these tools.
Are you not entertained? Are you not entertained? Is this not why you are here?
There's so many conspiracies and deceptions to keep us angry, afraid, numb and divided. We could spend our entire lifetime in search of truth in this never-ending factory of mass brainwashing. Every topic of conspiracy brings us into another layer of truth revelation. Each layer has multiple camps that are weaponized to create arguments and division. Each layer of lies supports the layer of lies below it, building a tower of deception so powerful that make us slaves turn against each other instead of destroying the cause of our enslavement to the system. Just like in the medical field, we are trained to react to symptoms, while destroying our bodies with solutions that prolong the sickness. We cannot escape this cancerous enslavement by fighting symptoms. The only way is to focus on the cause. Removing a tumor does not solve the problem. Knowing why it grows and making the right changes in our lives will give us the strength to eliminate the disease system of control. But like it was said in the beginning of this video, knowing is half the battle. If we do not act to break the chains, we are just like the other slaves, hopelessly in a prison of our mind, body and soul. It's time to make them obsolete. I believe the only change possible needs to start locally. How can we ever expect to change things everywhere if we start nowhere? It's time to make them obsolete.
There is a war between the people who own the world, the people who control the world, and the rest of the people, the masses.
Those who think that the economy doesn't have to abide by the rules of democracy need to tell us why.
Everything is very hidden. It's very difficult to have real numbers about anything. It's difficult to have answers about anything.
I'm not saying all political parties are evil or bad, but I think what they do is they give people the chance to not think, you know.
We came from everywhere. We had people who were left parties and right parties and middle parties and anarchists all together.
I believe I'm fighting for a better life for myself. And if I start doing that, all the other people who also want to do it, they come.
It is doable. You can do it in Portugal, you can do it in Rome, you can do it in Greece and everywhere.
There's only one thing that will scare the people who are in power enough to let them think they don't want to be in power anymore, and that's the threat of revolution. I'm sorry, but that's the only thing that worked here.
And I'm saying to people, this is no surprise to me. The Icelandic media does not talk about what's important for us people. They talk about what's important for them as owners, as greedy people.
Very long infomercials.
Are you not entertained? Are you not entertained? Is this not why you are here?